Picture this. You're 7 years old, it's 1982, and your babysitter just popped in a VHS tape that's about to rewire your brain for the next 30 years. The thing about childhood trauma from horror movies? It doesn't fade. It calcifies. It becomes the reason you still check behind the shower curtain, the reason you can't look at clown paintings without feeling your stomach drop, the reason certain sounds make you freeze even though you're now a fully grown adult who pays taxes and understands that monsters aren't real. Except part of you will never quite believe that last part. And here's what nobody tells you about these films. They weren't even trying to scar kids for life. Most of them were PG or PG-13. Some aired on network television during prime time. Parents thought they were harmless fun, something to keep the kids entertained on a Saturday afternoon. They were wrong, catastrophically wrong. One of these 15 films caused so many nightmares that school counselors across America had to hold special assemblies about it. Another one got parents so angry that the MPAA changed their entire rating system. And the film at number 3? It's the reason an entire generation can't go near a specific everyday object without feeling genuine dread. So what makes a horror movie truly traumatizing for a child? We're not talking about films that are just scary. We're talking about the ones that fundamentally changed how you see the world. The ones with images so disturbing they became part of your permanent mental architecture. The criteria is simple but devastating. These films had to be widely accessible to children. They had to contain imagery or concepts that children's brains weren't equipped to process. And most importantly, they had to leave scars that lasted decades. By the end of this, you'll understand why an entire generation of adults still has very specific phobias. You'll see the pattern of what breaks a child's brain versus what just gives them a fun scare. And you'll probably remember the exact moment one of these films changed you forever. Let's start with the gateway drug. Gremlins, 1984. Before Gremlins, the worst thing you associated with Christmas was maybe not getting the toy you wanted. After Gremlins, Christmas became a season of potential apocalypse. Joe Dante's film pulled off something insidious. It started as the cutest movie imaginable. A boy gets a fuzzy pet named Gizmo who looks like he was designed to sell toys. Then the movie reveals its true nature, and suddenly, cute fuzzy things are melting in microwaves, exploding in blenders, and transforming into scaly murder machines that terrorize an entire town. The kitchen scene alone, where Lynn Peltzer fights off gremlins using every household appliance as a weapon, taught kids that their home, their safe space, wasn't safe at all. But here's the real trauma. Gremlins made children responsible. Break 3 simple rules, and you destroy your town. Feed them after midnight? Your fault. Get them wet? Your fault. The weight of that responsibility, combined with the grotesque transformation scenes, created a specific brand of anxiety that's hard to shake. The lesson: safety rules aren't suggestions. They're the thin line between normal life and chaos. And kids internalize that message at a cellular level. The film performed so well that it helped create the PG-13 rating because parents were furious that their kids saw gremlins get pureed in blenders under a PG label. But by then, the damage was done. And Gremlins was just the warm-up for what came next. Return to Oz, 1985. Disney's unofficial sequel to The Wizard of Oz should have been magical. Instead, it was a dystopian nightmare that made kids question everything they thought they knew about Oz. The film opens with Dorothy getting electroshock therapy because adults think her stories about Oz are delusions. Let that sink in. A Disney movie about a little movie, girl being institutionalized and subjected to psychiatric torture. Then she returns to Oz and finds it's been destroyed. The yellow brick road is in ruins. Everyone's been turned to stone, and the new villain, Princess Mombi, keeps a gallery of severed heads that she swaps out like outfits. The Wheelers, creatures on wheels for hands and feet who shriek and chase Dorothy through ruins, became the stuff of thousands of nightmares. But it's the Gnome King sequence that truly scarred children. Characters who guess wrong turn to stone and get added to his collection. The stakes were permanent death, and the film didn't soften that reality. Why It Traumatized, Return to Oz taught kids that happy endings don't last. The place Dorothy fought so hard to save had fallen apart the moment she left. Everything you love can be destroyed while you're not looking. The lesson: nostalgia is a lie, and returning to childhood wonderlands might reveal they were always more broken than you remembered. But if you thought dismembered heads were bad, wait until we talk about puppets. The Dark Crystal, 1982. Jim Henson, the man who gave us Big Bird and Kermit, decided to traumatize an entire generation with this puppetry nightmare. The opening sequence shows the Skeksis, vulture-like creatures in rotting robes, performing a ritual where they drain the life essence from other beings to stay alive. This is a children's film. The imagery is utterly grotesque. The Skeksis are constantly decaying, arguing over food scraps, and plotting against each other with a viciousness that feels uncomfortably real. When one Skeksis dies, the others immediately strip his clothes and fight over his possessions. No sugarcoating, no comic relief. The Gartham, beetle-like enforcers, capture and destroy entire villages. The scene where they raid the gentle Podling village and drag victims away in cages played like ethnic cleansing for the elementary school set. And the worst part? The puppetry was so detailed and physical that it felt more real than animation. These creatures had weight, texture, and presence. Why It Belongs Here. The Dark Crystal refused to condescend to children. It presented a dying world with body horror, political backstabbing, and genuine existential dread. Kids weren't ready for that level of darkness wrapped in a fantasy package. The lesson: not all monsters are metaphors. Sometimes evil is just decay, corruption, and the powerful feeding on the weak. And speaking of things that shouldn't be alive. Poltergeist, 1982. Tobe Hooper and Steven Spielberg's collaboration asked a simple question. What if your suburban house wanted to kill your family? The clown doll. Let's just address it. That clown doll sitting in the chair, watching Robbie while he tries to sleep, then coming alive with strangling puppet arms. That image is burned into the consciousness of anyone who saw this film as a child. Clown phobia as a cultural phenomenon? This movie wrote the manual, but the clown was just foreplay for the real horror. The film escalates methodically. A kitchen chair moves on its own, then Carol Ann talks to static, then the tree outside attacks through the window, then reality itself starts breaking down. By the time Carol Ann is pulled into the television and the crew starts pulling corpses out of the swimming pool, the film has established that normal suburban life is built on top of something rotten. Literally, the house is constructed on a cemetery. The face-peeling scene where a researcher hallucinates tearing his own face off in chunks was so visceral that many theaters received complaints. It didn't matter that it was a hallucination. Kids saw an adult claw bloody chunks of flesh from his skull. Why It Traumatized. Poltergeist took the one place kids are supposed to feel safe, home, and turned it into hostile territory. Your toys could attack you. Your closet could swallow you. Your TV could become a portal. Safety was an illusion. The lesson: the ground you stand on has a history, and sometimes that history comes back to collect. But at least Poltergeist's evil was supernatural. The next entry is worse because it could actually happen. The Blob, 1988. Chuck Russell's remake of the 1958 creature feature updated the concept with practical effects so realistic that kids couldn't look away even when they desperately wanted to. The Blob isn't a monster you can fight or outsmart. It's a mindless digestive system that dissolves everything it touches. The film shows this in excruciating detail. When the blob engulfs someone, you see them melting, screaming, trying to pull themselves free as their body breaks down. The scene in the movie theater where the creature drops from the ceiling and consumes an entire crowd played like a feeding frenzy. But the real trauma was the sewer scene. A kid, an actual child character, gets pulled down a drain by the blob. The film doesn't cut away. It shows his terror, his futile struggle, his dissolution. Kids watching realized they weren't protected by protagonist armor. Anyone could die horribly in this film. Why it belongs here. The blob represented unstoppable consumption. You couldn't reason with it or escape it by being clever. It just ate everything, and the practical effects made every death visceral and horrifyingly plausible. The lesson? Sometimes there's no fighting back. Sometimes you're just prey, and your only option is to run and hope you're faster than the person next to you. And if the blob made you afraid of being consumed, the next film made you afraid of consumption itself. The Witches, 1990. Roald Dahl's story, directed by Nicholas Roeg, featured a scene so horrifying that it became one of the most complained about moments in children's film history. The Grand High Witch, played by Angelica Houston, removes her beautiful face to reveal the rotting, noseless horror underneath. But it's not just the makeup, it's Houston's performance. She goes from elegant to genuinely evil, screaming about exterminating children like vermin, outlining a plan to poison every child in England. The mask comes off metaphorically and literally, and both are equally disturbing. Then there's the transformation sequence. Luke, the protagonist, gets turned into a mouse by the witch's formula. The film shows his body contorting, shrinking, fur sprouting through his skin. He's conscious through the entire process. He's trapped in a mouse body, still thinking like a boy, knowing he can be stepped on or eaten at any moment. The film's message was bracingly dark. The witches will probably win. Luke might stay a mouse forever. His grandmother tells him he'll likely only live another 9 years in mouse form. The movie ends on a bittersweet note that refuses to pretend everything's fine. Why it traumatized? The witches taught kids that adults could be predators who wear disguises. That woman who seems nice? She might be planning your murder, and if she succeeds, you don't get to be human again. The lesson: trust your instincts about people. If someone seems wrong, there's probably a reason. Here's where the pattern becomes clear. These aren't films that just have scary monsters. They're films that attack fundamental sources of security: home, family, your own body, the adults who are supposed to protect you. They don't offer easy comfort or reassurance. They change how you see the world. And the second half of this list is where things get even darker. Something Wicked This Way Comes, 1983. Ray Bradbury's adaptation, produced by Disney, proved that Disney was actively trying to traumatize children in the 1980s. Mr. Dark's carnival arrives in a small town and grants people's wishes. But every wish becomes a curse. The film's visual design is pure nightmare fuel. A carousel that makes you younger or older. A mirror maze that shows you your worst future, a parade of human curiosities who were once normal people, transformed by their own desires. The spider scene remains legendary. Mr. Dark covers someone's mouth with his hand, and when he removes it, spiders pour out. The victim is conscious, choking, unable to scream as arachnids fill their throat. For kids with even mild spider fear, that image became a recurring nightmare. But the real horror is thematic. Your desires will destroy you. Want to be young again? You'll become a baby with an adult's mind, helpless and trapped. Want to be older? You'll age to dust. The carnival preys on human weakness, and nobody is immune. Why it belongs here. Something Wicked. This Way Comes taught kids that wanting things was dangerous, that growing up too fast or trying to change yourself fundamentally would have consequences. For children already anxious about change, this was psychological warfare. The lesson? Be careful what you wish for, because getting it might be worse than wanting it. And if Mr. Dark's carnival seemed evil, wait until you meet the next entry's villain. The Watcher in the Woods, 1980. Another Disney production that made you question what Disney thought appropriate for children. Bette Davis plays Mrs. Aylwood, a woman haunted by the disappearance of her daughter decades earlier. The new family moving into her property starts experiencing supernatural phenomena, backward voices, ghostly figures, strange lights. But it's the mirror scene that broke thousands of young minds. The daughter, Jan, looks in a mirror and sees another girl staring back. But it's not her reflection. The girl in the mirror is Karen, the missing daughter, trapped in another dimension and trying to communicate. The image of being trapped behind glass, able to see the real world but unable to escape, tapped into primal claustrophobia. The Watcher itself, a mysterious presence in the woods, is barely shown, which makes it more terrifying. It could be anywhere. It could be watching right now. The film creates an atmosphere of constant surveillance and dread that never fully resolves. Why it traumatized. The Watcher in the Woods made kids afraid of mirrors, woods, and old houses all at once. It also introduced the concept of liminal spaces, places between worlds, long before that became internet horror language. The lesson? Some disappearances are worse than death. Some people get trapped in places where they can see everyone, but no one can hear them scream. But at least the Watcher was supernatural. The next film's horror was entirely human. The Never-Ending Story, 1984. Wait, this is a fantasy adventure film about a boy and his luck dragon. How is this traumatic? One word, Artax. The swamp scene where Atreyu's horse Artax succumbs to sadness and sinks into the swamp of sadness while Atreyu screams and pulls and begs him to fight destroyed children. The horse literally dies of depression while his best friend watches helplessly. You can't fight sadness. You can't pull someone out of it by force. You can only watch them sink. But the trauma goes deeper. The nothing, the force-destroying fantasia, represents despair, apathy, the death of imagination. The film argues that when children stop believing in stories, entire worlds die. That's a heavy burden to place on young shoulders. And Fantasia's destruction is shown in painful detail, beloved characters turning to dust, landscapes crumbling, the childlike empress wasting away. The scene where Atreyu's beloved wolf dies defending him from Gmork, and Gmork explains that he serves the nothing because there's no point in resisting, introduced kids to nihilism. In a children's movie, Why It Belongs Here. The Never-Ending Story taught kids that depression is real, that sadness can kill, and that sometimes the ones you love most can't be saved, no matter how hard you try. It also suggested that the world's darkness is partly their fault for not imagining hard enough. The lesson: hope requires active effort. If you give up, everything you love disappears. And The Drowning Horse was just preparation for the body horror coming next. The Fly, 1986. David Cronenberg's remake was R-rated, but enough kids saw it through older siblings, cable, or VHS rentals that it traumatized an entire generation. Jeff Goldblum plays Seth Brundle, a scientist who accidentally fuses his DNA with a fly. The transformation is gradual and horrifying. First, his strength and stamina increase. Then, his skin starts changing texture. His fingernails fall off. His teeth fall out and are replaced by something else. His ears drop off. He starts vomiting digestive enzyme on his food before eating it. The film shows every stage of his degradation in extreme close-up. The practical effects were so realistic that the transformation felt documentary. This wasn't fantasy. This looked like footage of an actual disease consuming someone from the inside. The worst scene: Brundlefly, barely human anymore, begs Veronica to help him end it. His body is breaking down. He's in constant pain. He can't die naturally, so he needs her to kill him out of mercy. Kids watching absorbed a crash course in body horror and the loss of dignity that comes with physical deterioration. Why it traumatized. The Fly taught kids that the body is fragile, that identity is tied to physical form, and that science without wisdom leads to suffering. It also showed that love isn't always enough. Sometimes you have to let go even when you don't want to. The lesson? There are worse things than death. Sometimes mercy means destruction. But The Fly's horror was at least science fiction. The next entry could happen in any school, any neighborhood, any ordinary day. Number 5. It, 1990. Stephen King's TV miniseries brought Pennywise the dancing clown into living rooms across America. And clown-based trauma became a generational epidemic. Tim Curry's performance as Pennywise is the stuff of legend and nightmares. He's charming one moment, absolutely terrifying the next. The opening scene, where Pennywise lures Georgie into the storm drain with the promise of balloons and popcorn, then drags him into the darkness, established that this wasn't going to pull punches. But it's not just Pennywise, it's the shape-shifting. Pennywise becomes your worst fear. A werewolf, a mummy, a leper, a spider, your dead friend. The entity feeds on fear, so it customizes its appearance to maximize trauma. Kids watching realize that their personal phobias could literally come alive and hunt them. The adult timeline, intercutting with the childhood scenes, showed that trauma doesn't end. The Losers Club defeats it as kids, but they're still broken as adults. They still carry the scars. They still have nightmares. Defeating the monster doesn't erase what it did to you. Why it belongs here. It taught kids that evil doesn't need a reason. It exists to cause suffering, and it's patient. It'll wait 27 years if it has to. And even if you win, you lose something you'll never get back. The lesson: some memories don't fade. Some fears live in you forever, and the best you can do is learn to live with them. And if Pennywise made you afraid of clowns, the next film made you afraid of sleep itself. A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. Wes Craven's masterpiece asked the cruelest question possible. What if you weren't safe even when unconscious? Freddy Krueger, a child murderer burned alive by vengeful parents, returns in the dreams of their children to kill them in their sleep. And here's the brilliant horror. When you die in the dream, you die in real life. Sleep, the one activity you absolutely must do to survive, becomes lethal. The film's kill scenes are creative and disturbing. Tina gets slashed and dragged across the ceiling while her boyfriend watches helplessly. Rod hangs himself, except he didn't. Freddy did it in his dream. Glenn gets pulled into his bed and erupted back out as a geyser of blood. Each death proved that reality offers no protection. But the real trauma was simpler. After watching this, you couldn't fall asleep without fear. You'd try to stay awake. You'd fight your own biology. Parents couldn't help you because they didn't believe. You were alone with the knowledge that closing your eyes could mean death. Why it traumatized. A Nightmare on Elm Street eliminated sleep as a safe space. It also showed that adults' past mistakes come back to hurt their children. The sins of the parents become the nightmares of the kids, literally. The lesson: you can't run from yourself. Eventually, you have to close your eyes. And when you do, what you've been avoiding will be waiting. We're in the home stretch now, and these final 3 entries represent the absolute peak of childhood trauma. Pet Sematary, 1989. Stephen King adaptation that asks, what if grief made you do the worst thing imaginable? The Creed family moves to a house near a busy road and a mysterious burial ground. The road kills their cat. A neighbor shows them the pet cemetery, misspelled cemetery by children, where they can bury it. The cat comes back. But it's wrong. It's aggressive, wrong-smelling, wrong-acting. Then their toddler son, Gage, dies. Hit by a truck in one of the most visceral child death scenes ever filmed. Lewis, the father, makes a choice that everyone watching knows is insane. He buries his son in the cemetery. Gage returns as a murderous creature who kills with a scalpel, giggling in his little boy voice while he slashes throats. The film's message is devastating. Death is final, and trying to reverse it only creates suffering. But it also acknowledges that grief makes us irrational, that losing a child breaks something in the brain that can't be repaired. Wyatt belongs here. Pet Sematary showed kids that parents can make choices so catastrophically wrong that they destroy everything. It also forced kids to imagine their own death, being hit by a truck, coming back wrong, becoming something evil while still wearing your own face. The lesson: some doors should never be opened. Some prices are too high. Sometimes dead is better. And if Pet Sematary made you afraid of death, the next entry made you afraid of existence itself. Watership Down, 1978. An animated film about rabbits. How bad could it be? Catastrophically bad. Apocalyptically bad. This British animated film features rabbits getting caught in snares and choking to death. Rabbits torn apart by dogs, rabbits clawing each other to death in brutal fights, rabbits caught in gas attacks, rabbits dying in warren collapses. The animation style makes it worse. It's realistic enough that the violence feels tangible. The rabbits bleed. They scream. They die in graphic detail. The scene where the warren is destroyed by humans, rabbits suffocating in their holes, running blind through poison gas, played like a war crime documentary. General Woundwort, the fascist villain rabbit, creates a totalitarian society based on violence and control. The final fight between him and the dog is so vicious that it was edited for later TV broadcasts. But the real trauma is atmospheric. This is a film about refugees fleeing genocide, about authoritarianism, about ecological destruction, wrapped in a package that looks like it should be cute. Why it traumatized? Watership Down used the cute animal format to smuggle adult themes about violence, death, dictatorship, and environmental collapse into children's minds. Kids expected talking animals and adventure. They got existential horror and massacre. The lesson: the world is violent. Nature is violent. Civilization is violent. And being cute doesn't protect you from any of it. But there's one film that topped even that. The Brave Little Toaster, 1987. An animated children's film about household appliances going on a journey to find their owner. This should be adorable. Instead, it's a parade of existential horror and nightmare imagery that scarred an entire generation. The air conditioner has a meltdown, literally and figuratively, screaming about being abandoned, overheating, and dying while the other characters watch helpless. The junkyard scene features a magnet crane destroying cars while they sing a nihilistic song about worthlessness. The clown nightmare sequence needs no explanation. A demonic clown chasing the toaster through a surreal hellscape while flowers scream. Pure terror. But the real trauma is thematic. The film is about obsolescence, about being replaced, about becoming useless and being thrown away. These appliances love their owner, but he's forgotten them. They might go through this entire journey only to discover they're not wanted anymore. The scene at the used appliance shop, where broken, dying appliances beg to be bought, knowing they'll probably end up in the trash, introduces kids to economic anxiety and mortality simultaneously. You can become worthless through no fault of your own. You can be replaced by a newer model. Your purpose can end, and then what are you? Why it deserves number 1. The Brave Little Toaster disguised an existentialist philosophical crisis as a children's adventure story. It made kids question their own value, their relationships, their future. It taught them that love and loyalty aren't always enough. Sometimes you're just obsolete. The lesson: everything ends. Everyone gets replaced. The only meaning is what you create while you're still functional. And that's a lesson no child should have to learn from animated appliances. So here's what these 15 films have in common. They didn't just scare us. They changed us. They taught us lessons about death, obsolescence, betrayal, helplessness, and horror that we carried into adulthood. They created phobias that still trigger decades later. A clown doll in the corner, a storm drain with balloons, the sound of horses in water. These aren't just memories, they're scars. And honestly, maybe we're better for it. Maybe these films taught us resilience. Maybe they prepared us for a world that doesn't always have happy endings. Or maybe they just broke something in us that never quite healed. Either way, we survived them. And we're still here, checking behind shower curtains, avoiding storm drains, and sleeping with nightlights well into adulthood. If you want to see which horror movies traumatized the next generation, the ones that scared kids in the 2000s, with different techniques and new nightmares, let me know in the comments. Because horror evolves, but the trauma? That's eternal. Sweet dreams.